to trust Him more.
Overwhelmed, in despair, running scared, not knowing what to do. Have you ever felt like that in your life? You're just overwhelmed with everything that is happening and you're struggling. You don't know what to do. I can remember a couple of years ago at camp, this was week 3. Rachel, you were there that year. There were some things that happened that day that still to this day it haunts me. There was an incident that happened in the afternoon that I just couldn't understand why that could happen at camp. And then a little bit later on that night, we're sitting there at the amphitheater and it's dark. And I look and I see one of our campers. He's walking up the hill and he collapsed. And I go running to him and he's not breathing. I carry him to the nurse's cabin. And so they're working on him. The ambulance is coming and you're standing there. You don't know what to do. And I can remember just the fear that I had at that time. And then later on that night, Brother David Price, that was here a little bit late, a couple weeks ago, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm coming down to the cabin, and I'm thinking, now I can rest. And I get there, and I see David leaning up against the post of the front door of the cabin. He's holding his chest. He said, I don't know what's going on. And so I'm thinking, he's having a heart attack. So I rushed him up to the nurse, and thankfully everything was okay, but I was overwhelmed with the problems that were going on at that time. And all I could think of is, where are you, God? I thought this was a precious place. Where are you, God? I need your help. I can't figure this out on my own. I'm struggling. I'm alone. I need you, God. And you weren't there. Have you ever felt like that in your life? You felt like you were just swamped with the grief, swamped with the struggle. And it was real. It was alive. And you were scared. You were running scared. Sometimes that's what we go through in life. But God's not saying, I'm going to make it easy for you. But He does tell us that He will be there for you. And so when we look at this story in chapter 19, is Elijah's faced so much stuff right now. And he comes from the highest of highs. You know, I think about at camp, we're experiencing all the joy at camp. You know, we've had baptisms, we had all these things. And then this destruction happens. And things start to fall apart. But we were so high right here. God was with us. We were excited. We were having fun. We were singing songs. We were praising Him. And then all of a sudden, our world changes. That's the way life is. And it's hard to manage those trials that we face. Things don't go our way. We struggle with them. But as Elijah, at this time in 19, he doesn't realize that he's not going to face death. He's going to be carried up in a chariot of fire. But at this time, he is scared. He is worried about his life. He's worried about Jezebel taking his life. You know, I've heard people make jokes about, oh, she's a Jezebel or whatever. And I've never really thought about who she is, the evil person she was. And yet, here is this woman, she's made this threat upon Elijah. And Elijah is, you know, he what does he do? Turns tail and run. But yet, just in the chapter before, we see God using him in such a powerful way. If you want to go ahead and turn to 1 Kings chapter 18 and read this. We're not going to read the whole thing because there's a lot there. But when we look at this, we see Elijah he's saying, all right, you're living in this world and you're bowing down to this God you call Baal. And you think he is everything you need. But I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you that your God is not real. Remember, my God's better than your God kind of thing? Now we see that he's going to take the time and he's going to show them who God really is. And he starts off here in chapter 18, Chapter 18, verse 3. Ahab had summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of his palace. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken hundreds of prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Think about this. He is the the primary helper of King Ahab, and King Ahab's wife is out there persecuting, killing the prophets. And he's going to take the risk. He's going to take the challenge of hiding these prophets. That's special. In the fear of death, he was willing to do what God needed him to do. And we see this as it goes on. It says, go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive so we will not have to kill any of our animals. And I'll jump down onto verse 7. As Obadiah is going out to do this, he was walking along. Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him and bowed down to the ground and said, is it really you, my lord Elijah? Yes, he replied. Go tell your master, Elijah is here. Now, they've been looking for Elijah for a long time. They were wanting to kill Elijah for all the work that he was doing for God, not for Baal. And so for him to walk up to Obadiah and say, go tell your master I am here and I'm ready to meet him. Go tell him now. So Obadiah, he has to go before his master and say that. And he's fearful of this. He's scared. He says, what have I done wrong? What have I done wrong that you're going to ask me to do this? Because surely as I go and tell him that you are here, when we come back, you're going to be gone. He says, no, go tell your master, and I will be here when he returns. In verse 11 it says, but now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here. I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab he doesn't find you, he will kill me. But yet Elijah says, I need you to do this. There's important things that need to happen. I need you to do this. Then as we jump on down to verse 18, it says, this is after Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, is that you, you troubler of Israel? You troubler of Israel. For him to say that to Elijah who's doing the work of God, not the work of Baal, he says, you trouble of Israel. And he goes on, he says, I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family, you have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed Baal's. So he's telling them what you're doing is wrong. What you need to do is change your ways. You need to follow God and not this false God, this God that you made up, this Baal. He's saying, no, you need to follow God. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if he is Baal, follow him. All right. So he's getting down to the meat of the matter. He's wanting them to understand that this Baal, this thing that you are following is not right. It's not true. It's not good. But this God is right. God is good. He will help you. He will carry you through troubles in life. Excuse me. And then he goes on, he says, then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Think about that. He's standing before Ahab, and he knows that Ahab could kill him because he knows Jezebel wants to kill him. But yet he's standing there before him. He said, look, you have all these prophets of Baal, 450 prophets of Baal, and it's me standing here by myself before you for God. And so Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let them choose one for themselves and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. He's setting them up. He said, I want you to do this. I want you to go ahead and get that bull cut up and ready. You've got the wood there. Set it upon the wood, but don't set fire to it yet. He said, and then I'll do the same thing. I'll prepare everything over here. I'll put the wood down. And I'll place the meat upon the wood. I won't set fire to it yet. And he goes on, he says, Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first. Since there are so many of you, call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it. And I love this. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. They just continually called on him. They're dancing. They're, running around praying. They're trying to get Baal to come and light the fire to prove that he is God. And I love this next part. And Elijah begins to taunt them. Where's your God? Oh, is he busy? Is he busy? Is he traveling right now? He doesn't have time to come and help you and start the fire, right? So taunting them. Here he is. He knows his life is in jeopardy, but yet he's proudly and confidently standing before them preaching God. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning to noon. Oh, Baal, answer us. Please answer. Please don't make us look bad. Answer us, Baal. They shouted, but there was no response. No one answered. They danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Shout louder. Show more passion. Show more hope. Come on. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves. That was their tradition. They thought that would make Baal light the fire. They're starting to hurt themselves for this false god. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. It had to be quiet there at that time, don't you think? Because nothing happened. They prayed to this false god, and nothing happened. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me now. I want to show you who God is. I want to show you the power of God. That God is not this Baal, this thing that you pretend is real. And he goes on, he says, they came to him and repaired the altar of the Lord, which was in ruins. Elijah took 12 stones, one each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill your jars, fill these large jars with water. Go do that, and come back and soak down this meat. Soak down this meat. Soak down the wood. He says, go do it again. Do it again. Did it 4 times. Come and try to make it where this fire will not start, and I'll prove you wrong. Have you ever tried to light watered down wood in a campfire? It's tough, ain't it? I get the leaf blower out and hook it up and, let it blow on it and light a little fire, and usually I can get something going, but it takes a lot, right? But when you're sitting here thinking about, all right, they placed all this water on top of it. And he says to him, he says, do it a 3rd time, he ordered them. And 3rd time, the water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed. And listen to this. O Lord, God of Abraham and Isaac and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel. And that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord. Answer me. So these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. So this wasn't for Elijah to get the praise or look how wonderful Elijah is. It's for the people to turn away from the false god of Baal and turn back to God. And you look at this and you think about how we live our lives today. We sometimes get caught up in the worldly things, and we're praising those things. We put those things before God. They are our Baal. And he's saying to us now, he says, slow down and look and see God in your life. Those are the things that you need to be focused on. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, He is God. That's a told you so moment right there, that he is God. And so we see this, Elijah's gone through this great victory here, this high in his life, and he's doing this for God, and he's seeing how God is working, and he's seeing how God proved to the people of Israel that the Baal was wrong for them to follow. And so here he is, he's now, well, when we get into chapter 19, we're going to see him in that sorry state, in that state of confusion, that state of being lost, overwhelmed. So it goes on in chapter 18 again. It starts off in verse 40. It says, Then Elijah commanded them, Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away. They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered them there. And Elijah said to Ahab, Go eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. If you remember here, there's been 3 years of drought. And Elijah said to Ahab, Go eat and drink, for there is the sound of rain. Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. Go and look towards the sea, he told his servant. And he went up and looked. There is nothing there, he said. 7 times Elijah said, Go back. Then the 7th time the servant reported, A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. So Elijah said, Go and tell Ahab to hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops. Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose and a heavy rain came on, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came upon Elijah, and tucking his head under his cloak, tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. So we see this response here, this climatic response where he's on top of the world because he proved that Baal is not real, and he's showing that God is real. And now we see this Jezebel, now she's going to make this declaration. She says, this Elijah, he must die. We cannot have this anymore. So when we look at chapter 19, it says, Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Excuse me. So Jezebel sent a message to Elijah to say, May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. So the threat of death has come to Elijah from Jezebel. So you look at this and you look at what Jezebel just stated to him. That you will die. You will die. And here's the man that just stood before 450 prophets of Baal, stood before King Ahab and said, Your God is not real. He had that confidence and the willingness to stand before all those who hated him. And yet, here we are. We find him in this situation where God had been with him. God had taken care of him. And now when Jezreel makes this claim, when Jezreel says, I'm getting my mind mixed up, Jezebel, everything. When Jezebel makes a statement that you must die, he runs in fear. And yet he knows God has been with them all this time. And so when we read this further on down, it says, So Jezebel sent that message to Elijah to say, May the gods deal with me. Surely you're going to die like those prophets died. Then it goes on in verse 3, it says, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. Ran for his life. He knew that God had taken care of him all this time before now, where they could never find him, they could never kill him. But now he is fearful of what Jezebel can do to him. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the desert. He came to a broom tree, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. Getting to that point of despair, where there's no hope, there's nothing that I can get out of this. That I'm doomed. Death is going to come. Surely, God, just take me now. That's what he's saying. Then he goes on, he says, I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. We think about this and we think about what is getting ready to happen. And you got to think about this question that is going to be asked here in a few verses. What are you doing here? And this question we need to ask ourselves every Sunday when we get here. What are you doing here? Why are you here? What is your purpose? Are you part of this work? Are you part of the things that are happening here? What are you doing here? Well, I'm not invited in to help. Well, what are you doing to give help? What are you doing to get active? What are you doing to be part of this work that's happening here? All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. So in his despair, God is still there providing for him. God is giving him the sustenance that he needs to live. But yet he's saying, take my life because I'm done. I was a faithful servant of yours, and now I'm fearful for my life. I'm just done. And as it goes on, it says, then the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him. "What are you doing, Elijah? What are you doing?" And he replies, and you listen to this reply, and it's a man that's been working diligently for God. And I can only imagine how overwhelmed he is by the work that he's been doing, and now he's facing death. And he says, "I have been very zealous for you, God, for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected you. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me." So when we look at this example of who Jezebel, was, and she was the one that was threatening his life, Elijah has been through so much, and he's in despair right now. And that's like us in our faith, in our walk, that we find ourselves in despair, but we don't realize that God is there and He is providing for us. We need to open our eyes and get up and eat. Be part of something. To seek something, to want that, to strive for God's relationship, for God to be in my life. That's what we need to be doing. And overwhelmed right now, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with, trying to figure out how to come up with a sermon every other week. And I know the other men in the congregation are overwhelmed with the work that's going on. But get up and eat. He's providing for us. He's showing us a way. He is here. And our job is to serve Him. Our job is to serve Him. So the question is, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing to create a better relationship with your God, our God? That's something that each one of us have to be seeking. It's a relationship that grows every day. We can't get weak when the times get hard. And we're saying, "Where are you, God? Why aren't you involved in this? Because I don't see you." He's there. It's that peace that comes. When we think about peace, Elijah was seeking peace. He was running. He wanted no worries. He wanted God just to take him now. But as Paul says, to die is for Christ. But to die is for gain, and to live is for Christ. So the time that we have now is to live for Him and to praise Him with the example of our life and the relationship we have with Christ. Now, that comes down to you guys, each one of you, on that relationship, because you're the only one that can strengthen that relationship. You're the only one that can have that desire to have that faithful relationship with Him. Have that confidence as Elijah had before the prophets of Baal. To say, this is my God, and He's real. So today you have this opportunity to put on Christ, to have that peace that comes from Him, that comfort that comes from Him, that comes only from Him. So in our deepest and darkest days, we know that we are okay in His hands, that we have hope in Him. Now, there's some of us that are just overwhelmed with life right now, and we're faithful Christians, and we're struggling. We're hurting. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to do it. But there's a church family here that's ready to pray for you, to help you grow stronger, to help you through those struggles, to help you through that pain, to help you be the better Christian. So when that question asked of you, what are you doing here? I'm serving my God. I am serving my God, and I'll do it till the day I die. So I ask that you stand up with us as we stand and sing, and if you have any needs, come forward.
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus say, come unto me, I am